Hello, Kieran's away. I'm Tom Connell filling in for Kieran Gilbert. A busy parliamentary week. We had the pomp and ceremony yesterday. Today it's down to business, and Malcolm Turnbull, well, he's saying the first order of business will be what the double dissolution election was about. Of course, the Australian Building and Construction Commission. He's urging Labor to lend its support, but saying as well he is willing to deal with the crossbench.
And the Minister has always treated the crossbenchers with the greatest of respect, and we'll look forward to listen to any and all proposals for amendments. That doesn't mean they'll be accepted. And we're not going to, neither the Minister nor I are going to engage in a sort of a public negotiation through the media, but she will sit down and I may join her in some of these discussions with the crossbenchers, because we do want to reach agreement with them, but obviously the objectives of the bill have to be secured, because that is the commitment we've made to the people.
Well, for more on this, and of course plenty more to discuss as well, my political panel, I have with me Liberal MP Michael Sukkar and also Ed Husic, of course, Shadow Minister for Employment Services. Gents, thanks both for your time. I know it's a busy week and a busy day.
He's bringing a wibble, I'm bringing a wobble.
Oh, very good.
Oh, you want to bring the shimmy and I bring the shake?
Oh, I think I could be the wobble, you can be the wibble.
I think Josh Frydenberg's going to be jealous of all this. We better get
He missed out. He had his chance.
That's true.
And now we play on the basketball court, ready to duel it out here.
Could be the start of a beautiful thing. The red and the blue ties. Michael Sukkar, I'm going to start with you on the ABCC, because this was the double dissolution. Remember, before that, he refused to deal. This was all about the Senate crossbench, and he said, take it as it is. Now he's going to go and deal with them. Is this a sign of the weakened power of the Turnbull government?
No, not at all. I mean, I think, you know, we will sensibly look at any changes that Senator Xenophon, for example, wants to put forward. I mean, at the end of the day, this is about getting structural reform. We know the ABCC works. We know it delivers billions of dollars of productivity benefits every year, so we'd be foolish not to at least look at the alternatives that are put forward to the extent that they don't mess with the crux of what we're trying to do with that reform. I think it's very sensible, and I'd expect, you know, as a backbencher, that Minister Cash and the Prime Minister do in good faith look at these proposals, because at the end of the day it is so important that we end the rorts in the construction industry. And from my perspective, I'm not too concerned about how we get there. I just think we have to get to the point where the ABCC is re-established.
Ed Husic, Labor will surely at least look at this. You're talking about changes already that are being reported, reducing coercive powers, giving unions the right to enter buildings. I mean, these are the sorts of things Labor are unhappy about. Will you look at what's presented?
Well, come on, we can't walk away from the fact we just went through an excruciating election campaign, one of the longest in living memory. Why? Because before the election, the coalition said, effectively, take it or leave it. They weren't prepared to negotiate, and now they're saying that they do. We went through a double dissolution that actually expanded the crossbench, but we went to an election to try and reduce it. We went through election reform to try and reduce it, with the view that we would get pieces of legislation like this through, and now we're being told negotiate.
Right, that's the politics, though. But what about the policy?
Well, it's relevant because it now shapes both policy and politics. The Senate will shape policy and politics in the years ahead. And so, you know, we'll obviously have our Shadow Employment Minister will review, ultimately, Brendan O'Connor will review and respond, and will you know, take a stand accordingly. But our big concern has been that this has been coercive, that this has not needed to go ahead, and this has been more about satisfying ideological whim rather than a firm, genuine requirement.
But Tom, I mean, let's cut to the chase here. Labor will go through a faux process, but you know, the ACTU, the CFMEU, the union bosses are not going to give Labor permission to support this bill. So they'll go through the motions, but we know the outcome. We know they will never support ABCC, even though this is not a novel policy. We know that for 7 years, this body delivered billions of dollars of productivity benefits to the industry every year.
I do want to move on, because we've got quite a few things to cover. Negative gearing, Michael Sukkar, reports today, my colleague Peter Van Onselen in his book, that he's detailing that Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison actually argued for some changes to negative gearing tax concessions. They were shut down by a powerful economics committee. Is that your understanding of how it all played out?
Well, look, with all due respect to PBR, look, I'm not privy to cabinet discussions.
You don't have to give PBR
I was in the thick of it. Yeah, good point.
PBR, come on.
I was in the thick of it, and that is not, in my opinion, very, very implausible. I mean, obviously, I wasn't a part of the cabinet discussions, but I was in very close communications with the Treasurer, the Prime Minister, Ultimately, Cabinet...
Isn't it plausible, though, because Scott Morrison, remember, was saying on the record, there are excesses to rein in here. It seems plausible that this was the argument he was taking, and that if he was saying it at such a high level that they were thinking they'd be able to enact this change, but then it couldn't go ahead.
Well, I think, look, my view is it's implausible based on the discussions that I had with the Treasurer and by the fact that the position that we adopted was very different. So, look, I think we, prognosticate over the way these things work through the Cabinet. At the end of the day, we had an unequivocal position that we took to the electorate.
Is it still unequivocal because you've got a huge amount of money to try to actually deliver a surplus and some problems with other savings measures? Would you look at maybe a different policy to Labor's, a $50,000 cap, for example?
No, our position is not to take a hammer blow to the construction industry, the impact on rents and other things. We examined these in a lot of detail, and the costs of making this change, in my view and in the view of the government and the Cabinet and the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, was that the costs far outweighed the benefits.
Okay.
We gave it a great airing. And our position on that was very equivocal at the election, and it will continue to be. What
about Labor's position? We know what they took to the election. They did lose the election, obviously, Ed Husic. Is your position unequivocal? Could you look at a different plan that might be more palatable to, other parts of the Liberal Party, essentially?
We think this is important. We think it's important from an economic perspective. We think it's important from particularly a budget repair perspective that this, reforming negative gearing and the capital gains discount is an important policy area. It's an area of reform. But what we've had here is on an economic issue, the Prime Minister and the Treasurer within Cabinet couldn't hold sway on this issue. And, last week when Tony Abbott, said this is a government in office, not in power, that wasn't an observation. This is bragging. I mean, effectively, Malcolm Turnbull is less Prime Minister, more maitre d'. Or in parlance that he would like, he's the guy that works out your order in the Apple Genius queue because he's not making the calls on things. And he's allowing the right to dictate policy and to dictate outcome. He can't even get his way on economic policy within his own cabinet.
So again, though, that's the politics. What about the policy? Would Labor be willing to look at, this is what they took to the last election, fair enough, you didn't get into power, that you might still look into rein concessions in, but maybe alter the policy somewhat?
Well, hang on a second. We don't even know ultimately. I mean, what we are looking at here is a claim that both the Prime Minister and Treasurer were rolled on their preference on economic reform. And we don't have, at this stage, anything firm about what will happen with respect to negative gearing and capital gains other than an adamant view that's been expressed and reinforced this morning.
You can take the running again like you did when you first got the policy.
Sure, and we will. We haven't walked away from our policy. We continue to advocate reform.
OK, just quickly, Michael, before next topic.
I mean, let's just be clear. We won the election. The Australian people rejected Labor's policy. So I think Labor need to do a big review into their policy on negative gearing. We won the election. Our position was endorsed by the Australian people. Labor's position on negative gearing was repudiated. So the party that needs to be considering their policy, I'd humbly suggest, is the Labor Party.
So true. Yes. That's why super is not going to be changed. We're taking exactly the same policy at election. It's going to be implemented now. Absolutely.
It's probably a fair point. We might move on because I want to talk about Sam Dastyari, one of your colleagues, Ed Husic.
What have I got to talk about Sam for? He talks about himself all the time.
Well, he's not talking about himself today so far. That might be because he's paid back, he's going to donate $1,670 to charity after he's found a Chinese donor of his with close links to the Communist Party paid on behalf of him a fine that he had to pay because of he claimed too much on a staffing allowance. Now, he has claimed that, Michael Sukkar, and he's paying back to charity on top of that. You happy for that to be the end of the matter?
Well, the fact that he's paying it to a charity is a clear admission from him that what he did is wrong. And this is a pattern of behaviour from Sam Dastyari that's very, very concerning. He's had $1,600 of travel repaid by somebody affiliated with the Chinese government. Not long ago, he had a $15,000 telephone overspend. The question for him now is who paid for that for him? As General Secretary of the Labor Party, he had his own legal fees paid for by those associated with the Chinese Communist Party. He was General Secretary paying for Craig Thompson's legal bills. There's a pattern of behaviour here that I think raises the question, is Sam Dastyari a fit and proper person to be in our parliament.
Oh.
So what is,
Let alone manager of opposition business in the Senate. He can't even manage his telephone bills. He cannot manage his travel entitlements, and yet he is the man that's managing opposition business in the Senate.
So
I think Bill Shorten should be considering his position today.
you're saying Bill Shorten should take action or he should resign?
This is a private debt that he has asked somebody affiliated with the Chinese government to pay for. What Australian has a $1,600 overspend and goes and finds somebody to pay for him? Do you think the Chinese are paying it because of Sam's charm and winning smile? I don't think they're paying his $1,600 bill because he's just such a lovely guy. They want something out of Sam.
Two things here. Pattern of behaviour. The pattern of behaviour the coalition doesn't like is Sam Dastyari is effective at needling them. That's the pattern of behaviour the coalition can't stand.
Getting other people to pay his bills.
And when it comes to saying affiliated or has connections with the Chinese Communist Party, who in China, out of China, doesn't have that already? I mean, they would already have connections. Anyone we deal with, does that mean that anyone on the coalition side that is of a Chinese background shouldn't be dealt with? Is that what we're saying now?
Does it strike you as strange that he would get someone specifically to repay this amount of money?
Which he declared.
Yes, but that a Chinese donor would need to repay.
So why is he repaying it to a charity if he thinks it's fine?
Well, because
Chris Bowen,
you know
I can
what?
just ask as well, Chris Bowen has said he's paying it to a charity that shows an admission of something wrong. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, look, and this is the thing that people can't stand about politicians, that they will never acknowledge. They will never acknowledge if they've done something wrong. Sam has said he's not going to go through that. He'll just be upfront. You know what? Right, I accept it on the. You basically copped it on the chin and said, I am going to donate this money back to charity. I think people want politicians to not stonewall, but to be able to admit when they're wrong and deal with it and move on. And in all the cases that Michael referenced, Sam has acknowledged that, moved on.
Sam shows a lot of contrition when he's caught.
Right, can I get you quickly though, because you're talking about the Chinese
How was he
links.
caught? He was
$5.5 million
declared.
both major parties have donated over, or have Chinese companies have
Sure.
to both major parties over the last, I think, 3 years. So, I mean, isn't the broader issue whether you accept any foreign donations? This is all totally legal and above board.
It's a fair question, and it's a fair thing that we should be airing in the public debate. But here we have a private debt. So, I rack up $1,600 on my credit card and I go to somebody and ask them to pay for me. It's very different to me raising funds to fund election campaigns, which we do. In a competitive democracy, it makes sense. The Labor Party get a lot of money from unions. We raise funds. That is fair. Let's look at those things. But that's very different to saying,
okay,
I've got a private debt that I've racked up and I'm going to ask somebody to pay for it. Because, as I said, it's not Sam's charm and winning smile that they're paying it for.
I want to get you quickly on 18C, Ed Husic. Do you think ultimately that there's going to be anyone from Labor joining Cory Bernardi's signature sheet?
I don't think so. I think because we recognise that the priority for the nation is to bring it together, not to allow it to divide. And this 18C debate is, again, a proxy for a broader struggle within the coalition where people are wanting to call the shots against Malcolm Turnbull and put on his agenda. I mean, I can't believe that Malcolm Turnbull will allow a rump of grumps to dictate what he does in his government, and in this case, on 18C, to facilitate division within the community. I don't think it's a priority.
We're nearly out of time. Are you one of the rump of grumps, Sukkar?
Well, I'm on the record. I mean, I support a change to 18C. All you need to do is see the 3 Queensland University of Technology students who have had their lives, in some cases, dramatically impacted by frivolous claims under this section. But I think it's an academic discussion in the sense that we know Labor don't support it, the Greens don't support a change, and neither does Xenophon. So whilst I am very public in my support for a change of 18C, right now we have priorities. We've spoken about ABCC, the budget savings bill, and this is not going to get through the Senate at the moment.
We're right out of time. I'm sure Josh Frydenberg's very concerned after that performance. Gentlemen, Michael Sukkar, Husic, thanks for your time on AIM Agenda.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Good on you.
Stay with us on the program.